Good morning and afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Hit and Hustle from OurSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flammang. With me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Thursday, September 19th. We are going to preview Notre Dame's upcoming game against the Mighty Mac opponent, Miami, Ohio. Chuck Martin, former Notre Dame coach, is going to be back on Notre Dame's campus, and he is going to see if Notre Dame can solve the Mac problem that they've had this season. So I'm going to preview that. We're going to look at where we think things are the first quarter of the season, what position groups have surprised us, what players have surprised us, what players have been a little bit better than we thought, a little bit worse than we thought, and kind of how project that forward through the rest of the season. Marcus Freeman is talking right now. He's talking about Logan Thomas could play this weekend as part of the Viper rotation, Jamie, so we can talk about that. Man, he's made a big jump from where he was when he arrived on campus. He was like very, very small. He looks a lot better now. He's killing it on kickoff coverage. He might get into the game as a Viper. So we'll talk about all those things today. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. If you like what you hear today, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. So you know, whatever it is, we are going to go live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. And as always, Jamie, this show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing. They've finally restocked all their bamboo dress shirts online. You've seen all the bamboo dress shirts on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. It's made from proprietary fabric that's cooler and softer than cotton. It's the best shirt for any occasion. Go to esqclothing.com. Use ISD15 to get 15% off your order. That's ISD15 to get 15% off. Jamie, let's just talk right up top about Logan Thomas. What do you think about that? He could get some Viper reps in this game. What is your take on the ascension here of Logan Thomas?
Well, obviously he wouldn't be getting it if Jordan Botelho was healthy, right? So it's like, that's one thing to kind of remember with all of this. But I do think that Logan Thomas, like what I saw from him, I mean, he played 7 plays. It wasn't like there's a huge sample size, but what I saw from him, in that setting and how he looked, like I was like, man, he's twitchy. He looked like somebody who could play this year. Like I think he probably has a long way to go to play the run consistently and do a lot of things, and that's usually the process for a lot of these guys. But he's got the twitch. He can rush the passer. Like he could. Seeing him there, I thought, man, this guy could do a little bit what like Boubacar did last year, where it's like, hey, they need him in a game where like teams are passing a lot. He gets a chance to come in there and rush the passer. I think that's something that was going to be on the table for him. So I'm not surprised by that. I also think like when you look at what Junior Tuihalamaka is good at, like he's a good run defender. But I mean, he's basically shown like 0 against the pass in terms of just being able to get pressure and like win as a pass rusher. It's not to say that he won't now, but it's just like he hasn't shown that yet. So, and frankly, like Thomas has more of those traits that you kind of translate there. Also, like I want to point out, like, we did not get to see a ton of camp, but on the very first day, like Logan Thomas, like he won on an inside move against Gerby Lambert. That was like, whoa, like it was like a very impressive, like just explosive lateral move that I was like, oh, like that is something there. And typically just when you see stuff like that, I mean, he won on a lateral move to get a hit on the quarterback in this game too. That's good. Like that's always something that you're looking for. So, and I think even just with how things are too, like they're down 3 of their top 8 defensive linemen right now. Because obviously Patel's out for the year, Rubio's still out. Who knows when he's going to be back? And Burnham, don't know when he's going to be back, right? So it's like they kind of have to get the depth ready there because you don't know what it's going to be. and you get a couple more injuries, and it's like, wow. And then all of a sudden you go from playing a rotation to like, man, these guys have to play a ton of snaps, right? So I think it's important. It was important for him, for Armel Mukum to get 11 snaps in that game. And I mean, I would say too, like Mukum's probably not going to play, anything significant soon, but the more snaps they can get him, maybe, he is ready to play by later in the season.
Yeah, and you want I think Logan Thomas is a like you said, obvious passing situation, right? They put him in there. The thing is like you kind of want Boubacar to be in an obvious passing situations, but to your point, like now he has to be a first down player on the regular as well, right? So that's something that he's got to get used to. When I say he, I mean Boubacar in this instance. So it's nice to see that Logan Thomas's name's getting brought up, at least. Like he's obviously performing well in practice, and that's good on him. So that situation appears to be like Marcus Freeman did not mention Josh Burnham as moving over, right? So I think they're happy right now to keep it as what it is. I think because Josh Burnham has played over there in a pinch, right? It's
in a pinch
he's
you can
done
play
it before. Like in game, they don't have to rep it during practice. They can just put him over there. So that's a good thing. So we'll just that's something to keep an eye on throughout the game. Should Logan Thomas get inserted into the lineup, Jamie? All right, so let's have a little bit of a conversation about the first 3 games of the season, right? Like I think everyone goes into a year having something in mind about who Notre Dame's best players are going to be, who the best units are going to be. And we did our top 25 ranking. We did a preseason one. We did a post-camp one. And just kind of looking back now, like I'm just curious as to let's just talk about the top 5 for a second, right? Like I had Riley Leonard in the top 5. I don't know that it's kind of hard with quarterbacks because they're in charge of so much, right? Like how do you weight his touchdowns rushing and his rushing abilities, what he was able to do in the A&M game versus the lack of numbers in the passing game? Like I'd probably drop him, right? But like not a ton. Like he was at 2. I don't think he can be at 2 anymore. I don't think he's Notre Dame's second best player right now. But it's like I can't drop him too much. I'm curious how you are thinking about like Jeremiah Love. I think obviously, like I think I had him at 5. Like he's probably 2 or 3, right? Depending on Morrison and Watts. Like I don't think they've done anything to drop. But Jeremiah Love's like been really, really good. Obviously,
he's in the top 3 for sure.
Yeah, where are you at with Cross and Mills? Right, I know we both had them in the top 10. We both had Cross in the top 5. There's been talk about Cross being limited for whatever reason, hamstring. But where are you at with kind of where those two have been specifically this year?
I think Howard Cross has played a lot better than you would think.
Yeah,
just because I've watched. I mean, obviously, I've watched him a lot. I've watched the end zone copy and stuff too, and he's played like much better than people think. Like, I don't think like his PFF grade is stupid. Like,
I'm not that. This isn't reference to that. I'm not.
But I'm just saying, like, it's just like you can look at it where, like, man, last year's PFF grade was this and this, whatever. It's like, I don't really think I mean, he's definitely not. He hasn't been as impactful on a regular basis, kind of like getting penetration when he's one-on-one, but he gets double teamed like almost every snap. Like it's a constant now. Like teams are like, hey, we can't let Howard, like we have to double Howard Cross. Like that happens on almost every snap with him. And it happens with nose too before, but a lot of times too, people, they would have thought like, I mean, this guy's a 285-pound nose. Like, you can handle him, and no, they can't. Right. Like, so I think that is definitely a thing. Like he's the guy when they rush 4, he gets doubled all the time. So
yeah,
that is something like, to kind of remember. Also too, like I started tracking, like Havoc assists. Well, one, he leads the team. He technically leads the team in tackles for loss. He's got 2.5 tackles for loss. It's the most on the team. also he leads the team in havoc assists, which is basically like whatever he did, whether it's pressure, whether it was like, something that caused like penetration in the backfield or whatever, that set up a havoc play for somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's got four havoc assists. It's more than anybody else. So here's how I have the havoc assists. So Cross is 4, Mills is 3. So Mills is actually had done stuff which has caused havoc. Like obviously, I mean, he would have had a sack in this game if what's his face didn't, give the gift pick 6 to Boubacar, right? So there's like that kind of stuff. And then Burnham's got 1, Schuler, Bowen's got 1, Botello had 2. And so, he was doing it even when he wasn't, actually making plays. And then and Logan Thomas had 1 from the last game. So I think that Mills isn't playing good enough, in my opinion. Like he needs to be a way better player versus the run. Like that's just something that has always kind of been there with him.
Always been
He's
the
had
case.
moments. It's always been moments. He's rushed the passer well. He has rushed the passer well. He is impactful there. He wins a lot when he's one-on-one. You want to see him just absolutely like destroy a guard and and like blow up a play where that causes a tackle for loss for somebody else. And he just doesn't do that frequently enough because he's not the guy getting doubled, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's not the guy getting constantly doubled as much. So I think I think, he's probably hasn't been as bad as people think, but he's not playing up to the level that you would think that he should have ascended to. So I think that's totally fair with him. But I think like one of the things with Cross is like he gets doubled and they stick on it a lot, and that frees up the back. Like that is something. He has been a key piece of the defense, like in the overall success of the defense. So even though his numbers aren't like what you would think, and maybe he's not popping as much, he's still playing pretty well. Like he's still playing pretty well. And I'll tell you what too, whenever there's like a big, like, hey, it's 3rd and short or something like that, he's always the guy who's like, he kicked the snot out of his guy and, helped. Like if they make the play, it's almost always because of him. So I think that's something there. And obviously Botello, if we're kind of looking at like, was playing at an extremely high level. Extremely high level. So, I don't know. Like he's somebody who would have, if you're going for the first 3 games, like he's probably been a top 5 player for Notre Dame. It's just a shame that it's obviously season's done.
Yeah, I think the thing with Cross is because last year he was so there was so much production from him that I think people don't view him as the type of player who's going to eat blockers and free up others to make plays, like the linebackers, like kind of a Lewis Nix role, and that's what he's been doing, right? So it's hard to conceptualize like this player who was highly productive is now just a space eater almost at times. I don't say that's only what he's doing, but like he's just been a space eater. And so I kind of you have to switch your mind on that. But to the point, like that's where Riley Mills has to be. Like he can't be stalemating and having an okay game against like Northern Illinois.
No,
like you do, like you're too big and for that, right? And it's one thing. It's like they're an experienced offensive line, right? Well, Riley Mills is a senior too, right? So he is also experienced, and so you would think that his experience versus theirs, he's going to win out, right? Like that's what you need from a senior on your team and a captain. So, you okay, Jamie?
Keep talking. I'm going to pause for a second, grab water for 1 second.
Get some water. So Leonard Paul, this is interesting from Leonard Paulus. So he wants to, or Jacob Paulus, excuse me. I'm thinking of Riley Leonard. He puts up Riley Leonard grading him. I think grading Riley Leonard is difficult. So it says Leonard game 1, B+. Game 2 is an F. Game 3 is an A. So maybe B- average over 3 games, which is worse than the probably anticipated A type of play expected by the fan base before the season started. So yeah, like definitely. I don't know that I would honestly give him an F for Northern Illinois. He did score one of the touchdowns, and he was a key part of like that opening drive. And so it's kind of like if you score a touchdown, I'm not going to give you a failing grade. Obviously, in the second half, like he was not good. But they completely like changed the way they wanted to use him, which is, whether you want to say it's injury or whether it was like he got hurt. We don't feel like we need to be having to run him anyway. So we'll do these other things with him. But just like for you, Jamie, like without hot takey stuff, right? Like we don't like ignore how he's been discussed like online, just in the general public, and just take into account like how you evaluate the player. What would you grade Riley Leonard at in the first like three weeks? You don't have to go game by game, but just like overall in the first 3 weeks.
Probably a B-. Probably a B- because one, I think people didn't give him enough credit for the Texas A&M game, and I would give him a pretty high grade in that game because, like, he really got them out of bad situations a lot in terms of like not, turning negative plays and not like, giving opportunities for A&M to kind of take advantage of that. And then when it mattered, like he was great on the final drive. Like that was definitely a factor, and his legs were definitely a factor. And I mean, I don't know how you don't say like he was kind of pretty darn close to lights out in the Purdue game. Yes, I understand there are things in the passing game that you could critique, but like his impact as a runner was significant, and he was better on third down, like completing those kind of like, just even though you'd say like, hey, he should complete like this out route to Mitchell Evans. It's like, well, he wasn't the game before, right? And so I don't think like, I mean, there's still like a long, like if his season progresses and we're not seeing the type of progress as a passer, then I mean, obviously that grade is going to keep dipping. Like that's going to dip. But I was also thinking about this too, because I think one of the things that probably people don't take into account enough is that Notre Dame doesn't have a line, especially now that they got, 2 more guys injured. They don't have a line that you're going to feel confident like dropping back and protecting for an extra second and a half to kind of hit a deep shot, whatever. Like they don't have that there. And so because of that, that also limits how much, what they're calling and, what Leonard has confidence in terms of like his protection and be able to like, hey, I can wait this extra second to like hit that, like, that 15-yard crosser or whatever, right? Like that, 15-yard square in. Like, so I think that's probably like another factor that people haven't thought about, and maybe we haven't talked about enough too. But I mean, I'm not saying like anything. It's not like a satisfactory thing. It's a much different conversation when we're talking about like, hey, what do you need to like beat Georgia, or what do you need for this or that or whatever, right? It's like that's a totally different conversation than is what actually you've seen right now. And it's obviously he didn't play good enough to be NIU, but like he was significant in other games. Like it but then you're going to grade it different in the next thing. If he has like another NIU type game, I mean, this grade will go way down.
Yeah. Let me see. Here it is. Joshua Finn says, I was at the NIU game. You could see the whole team was flat in the warm-up. Wilts, the other kids were flying around. Stop blaming Leonard for the whole team stinking. I don't know that we blamed Leonard. We're speaking frankly about the way he played. I will say this, and I was kind of skeptical of like, they played down or whatever. Because
I'm going to guess Joshua Finn was talking in general about the fan base and not us.
Got you. That's fine. I've been skeptical of the idea that Notre Dame played down or whatever. It's just like, hey, they kind of played the same way against A&M. One thing that is really helpful when you get the benefit of getting the game copy in the all 22 tape is it's played without there's no crowd, there's no emotion, there's no announcers or anything. There's no narrative being given to you. You just kind of watch play after play after play. And I will say, like, it is just true that even when Notre Dame's struggling against A&M, like the quality of play in the first game and in the third game versus the second game, it's just completely different, right? Like they are playing at a different crispness, a different level of intensity. Like overall, it's just so much different than the second game. And look, a lot of that is when you're struggling, it doesn't tend to look as good, but just overall, it's like the receiver stuff, like you pointed out, like the way that the receivers played and the way they went about doing their rub routes, like routes when you're not getting the ball and you're not getting the ball, but they're still executing the way that you need to in order for the play to be a success. Like that is a big part to me of like, okay, they were locked in against Purdue. They were obviously locked in against A&M. They just were not in the same way against NIU. And, I don't want to go into like whose fault that is or whose responsibility that is. Like, it's on everyone, right? The coaches specifically.
It's human nature too.
Right. It is human nature, but it's like, that's just, it doesn't matter. The point is like there was a drop in play and the execution level and everything like that. Are you surprised? Are you surprised by like any other players? Like someone that I think about is just like, if I was to grade them or if we re-rank or whatever. And like, I think Jacob Paula said he doesn't like re-ranking against each other, but just like grading them. Like if I was to grade a player as like giving them a very high grade, like top 10, top 5, top 8 caliber, it's like I would say like Jordan Clark is very high up the list for me. I can think of one kind of mistake that he made, which he went low against the A&M kid. He jumped over him. Yeah, he jumped over him. It's just really athletic.
I mean, it was a great play by the back.
It's a really athletic play by the A&M guy. Other than that, though, like in coverage, I don't see many mistakes. Even on the plays where they don't throw it to him, I don't see him getting beaten. He is locked in kind of all the time. He's been better than Thomas Harper, and I did not expect that. The only thing is like they don't, and this is to credit Al Golden, like they don't send him on corner blitz. Like I felt like they sent Thomas Harper on way more blitzes, but they don't do that with Jordan Clark. And if like
they haven't yet, so
I'm just saying they haven't done it. Yeah. And look, and if they've seen it in practice, it's like, hey, he's not that great at it. Then don't have him do it, right? And to have someone else do it. Like so. Whatever they're asking him to do, he's been really, really good. I think he's been an absolute, I don't want to say steal, but like just kind of people didn't talk about him much, and he's been really, really good for Notre
Dame. They did blitz him a couple times in the Jersey scrimmage in the spring, and he got a sack and then forced the ball out a couple times, like timed it up really well. So I do think like that's kind of in their bag, and they probably will use it at some point. I think that, and I mean, if you look at it too, like Golden blitzed Harper and Bracey a lot more, a lot more. I think that Clark has also been so good in coverage that you're just like, I don't want to take this guy out of coverage. Like it's like that kind of thing too. So, I bet that it probably has a little bit to do with it. I mean, he's been great. I thought he was going to be very good. Like I thought he was going to be very good. Like I wasn't one of these people that like I just knew like they played they changed the defense last year at Arizona State. They played like way less man.
Yeah.
He was also hurt, played injured like most of the year. Like I just knew I was like, he didn't have a great year. He wasn't horrible, but he didn't have a great year. But he was much better in the other defense, which was a lot more similar to what Notre Dame ran. And also just knowing like he's a smart kid, he's like a football junkie kid. Like I was like, he's gonna fit in and like do fine. And so I thought he was gonna do well. But yeah, like I mean, if he keeps playing like this, he might play himself into being drafted. Like
Yeah.
that's something. And he's been yeah, like I won't even call it like a total surprise, but like I guess a tiny surprise that he's been this good so far. But obviously, I think this week they're playing, Miami, Ohio, and then K McDonald is a really like he's their number one guy and he's a slot, and they target him like
Number
he's
15.
averaged. Yeah, they've averaged 10 targets a game. He's had 2 100-yard games. I mean, that's a guy that he is going to be in coverage against quite a bit. So, let's see how he does because he's probably going to see a lot more volume
Yeah.
in this game. So, yeah, I'm excited for that matchup.
Yeah. Notre Dame does a really good job of helping their slots too, right? There's always a safety there. They're always funneling them. And I think part of being a good slot at Notre Dame is knowing where your help is, playing to your help,
Yeah,
and not trying to, kind of do too much, right? Like,
they
hey,
won't
if I'm
ask him totally to
right,
be
like
one on
if
one
I'm
with him.
supposed
Like,
to
yeah,
be on the, I'm supposed to be outside leverage, then I'm playing outside leverage, and he's not getting outside of me, kind of thing. So that'll be an interesting matchup. Isaac K asked, can Notre Dame beat Louisville with the same game plan from Purdue? So here's the thing: with Notre Dame's defense, they can beat any team playing any kind of way, right? Like their defense is going to keep them in every single game because they're that good. Um, like I think it's not specific to opponent, right? Like I think generally speaking, you have to be able to throw the ball more effectively than Notre Dame is to be like a really good team, a really
yeah,
good offense, I should say. Just period. You need to be able to throw it more because, and in Notre Dame especially, because like you said, their line is not good enough to mitigate, like a bad, like a bad passing attack, like because they're just not going to be able to just pound it at teams like that, right? You saw it against NIU, like even if they had run Leonard, like I don't think they were going to run for 250 yards in that game. Like they needed more from the passing game to be a successful offense. Now they should have just still won the game. Like one more touchdown probably gets it done, but you might need a little bit more than that against Louisville. So you can, I think they can definitely beat Louisville with however they played against Purdue, right? Just run the ball, right? I mean, 3 touchdowns might be enough, but you just don't want to have to count on that over and over again.
no, and I mean, you don't want to. I mean, Louisville is a better defense than Purdue. That's 100%.
Yes,
They're going to be better than Purdue,
they're a better
but
football team
they're a
overall.
better football team in general. But I do think that, um, like this is the one thing about Louisville. Don't really know much about them
Yeah.
yet. They played Austin Peay and um, Jacksonville State. Beat the brakes off of both of them as expected. Like
Mhm.
that's what you're supposed to do. So that's great. Good for them. Well, now they play Georgia Tech this week. And you'll learn a little bit more about them. But I mean, Georgia Tech lost to Syracuse, like, and they beat Florida State. Now it almost looks like you're like, maybe Georgia Tech should have beat Florida State much worse, considering like what you've seen from Florida State. Like, you know, Florida State's offense looked the best in that game compared to like how they've looked in their other games, right? So,
Mhm.
um, I don't know. That game is obviously that's a game that Notre Dame fans should monitor this week because obviously those are two teams that Notre Dame's going to play. Um, I'm very interested to see Louisville this week and see where they're at. The other thing with Louisville is that So Tyler Barron was the transfer who was supposed to be like the guy that pair up with Ashton Gillard or whatever, and that was supposed to be, this guy, and he's been really good for Miami. But like he transferred into Louisville and then transferred out, right? So I don't know if it was NIL or whatever the deal is, but he was in and out. So they lost him, and then already, because I've already been diving into Louisville, is like I didn't realize that Mason Rager, he was the guy, the only guy who I've ever seen put Joel on his butt on a bull rush. And he was like, he had 2 sacks in that game against Notre Dame last year. He was a factor. Like he was a dude and was second on their team in sacks last year. Well, he's out for the season, basically. Like he had like problems with some knee operation in the offseason and he's not there. So it's like, that's, they're not as, I don't think they're as good as like people kind of expected because they don't have all of those guys. And, yeah, you're right. I'm looking ahead. We're talking about this is a podcast. We're not the Notre Dame staff. We don't have to worry.
Playing. I'm not a player.
Yeah, and we haven't even dived into. Don't worry, we're gonna dive into Miami of Ohio, guys.
Yeah. So it's we're monitoring Louisville, right, and what they can do. But the long story short, listen, if Isaac K wants to ask the question about Louisville, we'll talk about it. It's fine. We'll be okay. We're not looking ahead. We're not on the team, and so it doesn't matter if we talk about Miami of Ohio at all. But you do want to get on a good team, Jamie, and you want to find a team that fits for you, and the team you want to join is VSR Media for your media company, for your website, for your small business, whatever it might be. You want to pump up those numbers at your small business. You want to get people looking at your highlight tape. Go to VSR Media, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy Award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior, and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. All right, Jamie. Is it going to happen again? Do Notre Dame fans need to worry about another kind of letdown performance? Is Miami of Ohio the type of team that can put Notre Dame on their back foot the way that Northern Illinois did?
I don't think so. I mean, one, the fact that the Northern Illinois game already happened, like that is a thing. Like, there's no way that they're not going to be like locked in this week.
For
there's
sure.
no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. And
they're not going to get caught sleeping now.
They're not going to get caught sleeping in this game. And there's like a bunch of other things, like a large number of Miami staff under Chuck Martin, right? Obviously, former Notre Dame assistant Chuck Martin, were like GAs and interns at Notre Dame in like 2011, 2012, 2013. So Mike Denbrock like knows all those guys, and he's not going to be like, "Hey, I'm coming with a D+ game plan this week against like a very good." It's a good Miami defense. Like, it's a good defense. They never give up big plays to the air. Like, very rarely. They've only given up 4 passes of 20+ yards a season. If you look at like what they've done in terms of just like, deep shots, Northwestern Cincinnati 1 of 8 on deep attempts. The final 10 games of 2023 teams were 17.6% on deep attempts. Like, it's because they take it away. Like, they don't want you to do this. They're like, hey, you can throw in that window, in that intermediate window. You want to throw like that whole shot and cover 2, go for it. But you got to make that throw. Yeah. And you will get good yards out of it, but you have to make it. And that's how they challenge you. So, and that's something like, hey, I don't know, like maybe that part of it might be a little bit nerve-wracking for Notre Dame fans, because I could see moments in this game where like Leonard is missing those intermediate throws that you kind of have to make to be able to kind of move the ball if you get set up
if your
behind.
running game isn't working.
Yes, if your running game isn't working. In saying that, they missed 24 tackles last week against Cincinnati. And I'm not saying they're going to miss 24 tackles again, because I think that was like probably a little bit of an anomaly. But they gave up a 40-yard run and a 60-yard run in the game. Missed quite a few tackles in the game, even though they have like a lot of veteran defense. Like their 2 inside linebackers are very good players. They have like a lot of guys that just with a ton of experience. But I mean, Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, I'd call them tackle breakers. Like they're
just like there's data to support this, right? Like they are in the top like 10 of college football in missed tackles forced and elusiveness and things of that nature. So.
Yeah. And then Riley Leonard, same. He forced 6 missed tackles in against Purdue. So I think you're going to see the running game have success, and they will create some explosive through that. And in order to create explosives in the passing game, it's going to be like yards after catch is going to be a big thing. So I think that's going to be something that is important in the game. And I could see there's like, there's going to be some drives that I think probably like hopefully there's not too many 3 and outs, but there's going to be some drives where it's like, man, they missed on first down, all of a sudden it's 2nd and 10, but and then they're kind of caught behind it because they're, you don't have the trust in the passing game, right? So I could see that a little bit with the Notre Dame offense, but I don't see how they're going to score points, like, or at least not consistently. Yeah, they hit a play here or there. Could happen. Definitely. Their running game stinks. They're dead last in the country in yards per carry. They're 116th in EPA per rush. They can't run the ball, and they don't have the backs that are really like good enough to do it. And this is like, they have a veteran line, and those guys haven't played good. They've been like overwhelmed by Northwestern and Cincinnati. And I'm just going to tell you, like, Notre Dame's got a better defense than Northwestern and Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. So what they've had to do is they basically drop back and pass 65% of the time. Man, that's a recipe for a disaster against Notre Dame. If you do that against Notre Dame, you're not going to win. You're not, because they're going to bring too much pressure. They're going to force you into mistakes. It is really, really hard to drive the field that way. And Notre Dame doesn't give up many explosives. Like they're one of the best in the country at not allowing explosives. And they have guys that can man cover across the board. And I mean, people saw like with the pass rush last week, like if they get a chance to really like pin their ears back and go, they can do it. So like, I think the pass rush will get after them. I think Miami's going to struggle to move the ball for most of the day. And they'll need some kind of like breaks in order to kind of have like success on that side of the ball. So I don't see them scoring enough points and kind of like moving the chains enough. So I think Miami's defense is going to be on the field too much. And that's probably going to end up kind of breaking them in the end, right? Because the thing is that, they've played about 20 guys total on defense in the first 2 games, because they're playing these games, tight games against, power conference opponents, right? At Cincinnati and Northwestern. So they're not like digging deep into the well against, because they also can't. They don't have the guys that are like, they can't just throw in a Kennedy Urlacher and he's just all of a sudden going to come out and just ball out of nowhere, right? Like that's not happening with them. So they need to keep their best players on the field as much as possible. And so if Notre Dame just sustains some drives here and there and like possess the ball, like they're going to wear those guys down. So even if it's tight at a certain point in the game, I think just the dam was going to break eventually, and they're going to end up like scoring, and that's how you miss tackles, and that's how all of these things happen, because it's like these guys will be tired. Like it's going to be a lot for them to do. So I think they're a very well coached team. They're going to come out and play really, really hard. but I just think stylistically, it's a very different team than NIU. Like NIU had the style of team that was like, hey, they could maybe give Notre Dame some problems. And even then, for the game they played, 9 times out of 10, Notre Dame wins that game. They won the 1 out of 10, right? And I just don't think like with Miami and how they're built right now, especially with not being able to run the ball very well. I mean, I think it's more like 99 out of 100. I don't see them having much of a chance at all. Just that's how I see it.
So there's the analysis piece, right? Was like what you just did. Like you go through it, and like obviously what you said is true. Like stylistically and the way that you get over on Notre Dame, you just don't. If you can't run the ball, like I don't, you're putting Notre Dame's best part of their whole team on the field all the time, which is their passing defense, right? And so that just isn't a good thing, right? Like Notre Dame can score. Notre Dame can score just with their defense, right? Like they can score enough points just that way, right? Like creating havoc and turning the ball over and scoring themselves, and whatever it might be. So there's that. There's also the piece where it's like, as someone who watches games, who has watched Marcus Freeman, like, and I said it after the NIU game, like predicting this team is just impossible. Like you could get really anything. Like the downside of what you're talking about is, like you said, in that even if it's tight in the whatever, let's say middle third, they're eventually going to break, right? Like that was kind of what you said about Miami. Let's say even middle second. We don't even have to get into about. If it's like 10-7 Notre Dame in middle of the second quarter, and every time it's third and long, they are either missing a pass or trying to throw some short screen and they're getting tackled or whatever, and they have to get off the field. Like the puckering in that stadium is going to get
that's what they'll have to deal with. Good point.
And that's a real thing. And it's like, what if it's so different when like against the it's so different when it's against Texas A&M and they were struggle busing and it was 13-13. It's like, yeah, like you'll do anything to win that game. Any win against A&M in that spot will be fine, right? But that's not the case. And there's so many times with Notre Dame teams where they get into a game like this, where if it's close in the third quarter, you almost feel like they've lost already. You've already lost, whether you actually win the game or don't. And trust me, you shouldn't feel this way because it feels so much different. Like the Toledo game in 2021, like you felt like, man, they've lost already. It doesn't even matter what happens. But then when you end up coming back and winning, yeah, it does feel it feels a lot different when you ended up winning the game. You exhale and you move on to the next one, right? But there is a feeling where, man, like that NIU game, it was like Notre Dame's lost this game as this fourth quarter starting, just because of how poorly they were playing. And it felt like NIU had already won. And that's how it can feel in that stadium. And, that's the thing with, people talk about the lack of home field for Notre Dame. It's that when it's close in the third quarter, it's almost like, man, like we didn't play well today. Like we've blown it before you've blown it. Right. And I think that's the pervasive thought. And so that's the kind of thing that I don't want to say scares me, but just like it's in the back of my mind. Like, man, what happens if, they have a couple, like you said, like not even 3 and
ball
outs,
gets
like,
tipped, all of a sudden there's an early pick or something like that. And like, there is stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, I do think that, that's always a possibility in any game. And I do think like, that's the thing that not just this week, but against Louisville too. Like the thing is that what makes it so different, and I know we've harped on this already with like Riley Leonard, and I hate to keep talking about it, but it is a thing that there is a level of general distrust in him as a thrower, like no one cares about, hey, he did this at Duke. It's like, hey, he's not doing this.
Doesn't matter. Yeah,
at Notre Dame.
Doesn't matter.
So that's what people care about. So if they see him, there's a guy open on a crosser and he throws a worm burner or sails it over his head or whatever, right? If you see against, even if he has a great game this week, people are gonna be like, okay, well, now Louisville's a real defense. And then he does some of that. Like, there are going to be like, oh, like in the stands, like that is going to be a thing. And that's kind of the whole thing of like, Ian Book like fed off the hate. He was like one of those guys who was like, oh yeah, sure. Okay. And then he like started playing better because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But not everyone's like that. And I mean, we only have the one example of Leonard in the NIU game, and it was like, it did feel like he was kind of feeling that, like the bad part of it, like, and was getting. So,
yeah.
I mean, I do want to see him kind of overcome it. And then also too, that's why you're always like, hey, if things aren't there, then you do look at kind of making a change and what, just for a spark or something. But I mean, I just think ultimately, like, they're just going to have enough success to running the football that it just won't matter.
We're talking about something that can't be, it can't be predicted, right? Except that it's possible, just to say that it's possible, right? There's nothing in the data that would indicate that any of this happens, right? Even the NIU game, like okay, NIU, they ran the ball well and on and on and on, right? Notre Dame needs to win that football game, right? They do, especially built the way, and because when you look back at the game and then you look at how Notre Dame beat Purdue, it's like, man, they should have just kept, like, if they would have just kept at it and been like, hey, we're going to run it down your throat. If they would have just kept at it like that, they probably would have been just fine. But like, you don't want to have to just win by any means necessary against NIU, and like, that's the part of this that's like where the games get close and other teams play themselves into it, because when you have a team like NIU or Miami, Ohio, or whatever it might be, they have win this game by any means necessary. It doesn't matter. Win by a half point if they'll let you, right? Whereas the other team is like, no, it has to look a certain kind of way. It's not just win by any means necessary. We've got to work on things. We have to be able to hit this shot. We have to take this shot. Like, in a perfect example is like Notre Dame was in a position against Texas A&M where, hey, we could take a shot here. Why not? We just gone to midfield. We can get the kill shot on this team. We can. Never took it. And we talked about it. Never talked. We talked because it was like, don't need to try it. Let's just run it at them. Let's get the lead, and we'll just go win the game, right? We can run out this clock. Notre Dame wasn't thinking that way against NIU. It was like, hey, let's hit a shot against this team. We should be able to hit a shot against this team. And you take your shot, and it's obviously it blows up in your face, right?
Yeah, I think after the NIU game, Mike Denbrock kind of talked about this and said, like, I need to look at it like how I'm calling it, and not to be like, hey, we can do this, and be like, hey, this is what we can do, and this is what. So that's why too, like, that's how everyone will think about it. But I don't think Mike Denbrock's going to be thinking, because trust me, if they get into a thing and all of a sudden it's like, hey, he didn't hit that, they're going to be like, hey, first play next series, quarterback counter. You know what I mean? Like, that's how it's going to be. Like, they're going to do that. They're going to do that. And then they'll say, like, if they get comfortable, then maybe they open it up a little bit more. But it's just like, I just don't see them like getting off of, what will get them, make sure that they win the game, because they know they don't have the luxury to be like, hey, we can do all these different things. They don't. So just you got to do what you got to do to win.
Ant VR with a question, and I think it's relevant to kind of what we were saying. At what point do you consider a quarterback change? So let's say Notre Dame. It's that Notre Dame. They've scored on every drive to start the games in all three. There's a field goal against A&M, and it's 2 touchdowns. Right. Let's say they go down, score a touchdown again. Let's say it's 7. Let's say it's 7-0. You go 3 more drives, you don't get anything. All right. Let's say not turnovers. Okay. You're just going down, you're not scoring points. Right. Now, you could say, well, like, hey, we need to be able to grind on teams, right? Nothing has changed. That Notre Dame is still Notre Dame still is like a run first team. That's the best part of their team right now. Do you make the change? Do you consider making a change at that point? If they're ineffective moving the ball, but it's like, this still is like Riley Leonard still represents the way that we need to win and we need to keep him out there? Or do you try to change it up?
I think that every one of these games is so important to Marcus Freeman in the program right now.
Yeah.
That I don't think they'll change it unless it's like, hey, we can't win by doing this. Like if they think this is the best way to win, they're going to ride it, and Riley Leonard is going to run the football a lot. He might get to that 1,000, Greg, because like that's what they'll do, because it means that much to get into the playoff and, have all these things, because not only does it mean much for like, hey, Marcus Freeman's contract extension and validating the big money that the coordinators got and all this kind of stuff. But it also means like you got to show something in this year to recruit better. Like they're definitely like, they're feeling the pressure to be like, hey, we got to, they know that they're recruiting at a good level. They're doing a good job evaluating whatever, but they know they're not like at a level where they should be, like where they need to take it up a level. And that is something that I know that they're aware of. And they don't, there's so much too of like, hype is a thing in recruiting in terms of like building like momentum and all that. And you can only sell hope for so long, right? And year 3 is when you can't sell hope anymore. You have to sell results.
This is what you are. Yeah.
So they need results, right? They need results. And as much as it would help, with like receiver recruiting to be like, hey, we did this or whatever, no one cares if it's like, hey, we were working on the receiver stuff and, we eventually got it going, but you finished 9-3. Like no one, the recruits won't care. The fans will definitely not care. Like, so that's, I don't think anyone should anticipate a quarterback change until it's like, okay, it is time. Like it's going to be something that I think, if you look at how, like, even if you look at that Brandon Wimbush situation in 2017, that was like leading up into that. And it kind of, it was gradual, like, and then it was like, there's no other choice. We got to do this now. And the offense just wasn't doing anything. So like if they go into this game and they squeak by Miami, and then it's like, if they squeak by Miami, like what are they going to do against Louisville and Georgia and Tech and whatever, right? Yeah, then they look at I 100%. I think it's like whatever, but I also think like you don't want to just give it to the next guy. The other guy has got to earn it. And I don't think for all the, how as good as he has looked when he's played, I don't think Angeli's like really 100% earned it yet. right? Like he was pretty good in the spring, but like he had some struggles against Notre Dame's defense. And I don't think he was like lights out in fall camp either. It wasn't like there was no buzz. I never heard one thing saying that, like, man, I think really Angeli should be getting more of a shot here. Like
That
that
was the I'm telling you, that was the buzz with Book in 18.
yes.
People were
I mean,
talking.
it
It
was the
was a
buzz at
thing.
the end of 2017. That was like
Yeah,
a
it was a
thing.
thing. Like he has performed better and he has looked better. And all 2018, it was like, look, Ian Book is the better quarterback, but they wanted, Wimbush's, his legs and, whatever. He was a very highly rated recruit and all these other things, right? Like there was a reason they wanted to do that. It was so. I think with Angeli, that hasn't been the case. Just as a matter of fact. Now, look, it's a little bit different, right? Like this staff is a lot more tight-lipped than I think it was in the 2018 era, right? Like it was a lot easier to get information then. But at the same time, like I think they would have made the move. As soon as they decided Leonard couldn't run, I think they would have made the move at that point. And they didn't. And I think it's indicative that they didn't, right? So it's just like I don't have the answer, and neither do you, obviously, about like when, because we aren't there and we don't know, and we don't know how we don't know how they're practicing, and we don't know how the team feels, and we don't know how the coaches feel or Gaduli feels or about any of these things. But to your point, like it just I don't think they can make a move with the intention of going back. Because first of all, the thought of Marcus Freeman like handling a 2-quarterback system is just kind of like, it doesn't make me feel good, right? I think if you make this move, to your point, it's like, okay, this is done. We can't do this anymore. And look, they got to solve the zone problem. If you tell me a team's going to play man against Notre Dame, I feel a lot better than it's like, yeah, they're going to sit back in zone. Like you said, they're going to make you pick the window throw to put it in. Because right now, Leonard doesn't look great going through progressions, knowing where he needs to be looking, and then having his feet be set to where they need to be, when that window comes open, right? He just looks very confused when he's in that kind of zone setting. And so that's a problem they're going to have to solve, right? Because, look, I pointed out on Twitter, these teams, they have scouts, advanced scouts, right? They know all this stuff. I can't say anything that is like a surprise to them. So, I don't know. I didn't mean to be for this to be kind of like a downer at the end of the conversation, but it is what it is, right? Like I think everyone's thinking about it. And look to your point, like in everything you said and everything you talked about, like this is a good matchup for Notre Dame in terms of the strengths of Miami, Ohio on offense. And they gave up big plays in the running game. And that's what Notre Dame wants to do. They want to gash you in the running game there. Jamie, have you finalized a prediction yet?
Yep. I already sent it in.
Let's hear it.
Notre Dame 41, Miami 6.
So you're going full on like just bounce back game, that it's going to happen. They are locked in. Reversion to the mean in the sense against the.
It's just a bad matchup.
Yeah,
it's just a bad matchup.
Yeah,
I just like you can't run the ball. You can't run the ball at all. You're gonna drop back 40 times a game. That's what you're gonna try to do. No, it's like you're not gonna score. You're not gonna score. So it's just what it is. Or like you're not gonna score enough to scare them. That's for sure. And then they just won't they won't be able to. And because of that too, Notre Dame doesn't even have to be great on offense to score 41. Like they need to just just wear them down basically. And then, I don't think it's going to be like, hey, it's 28-0 at half. Like it could be, but I don't see it as that. I think it's like probably more likely that it's like, 20-3 or something like that, where it's like, and maybe it's like there's like a times in the first quarter where or like midway through the second quarter, and you're like, man, there hasn't been a lot going good for Notre Dame's offense, and then Jeremiah Love will break one, and then it's like, okay, well now they got like a 2-score lead, and then they get a couple, they're all of a sudden they're up 3 scores by the end of the half, and then I mean, they're not going to be like, hey, we need to establish the run here while we're down 17 or whatever they're down in the thing. And Gabbard is going to make mistakes. He's going to get hit. They're going to cause turnovers. So that's the other thing. You're going to get like shorter fields and stuff. I mean, I guess maybe they won't, like, depending on who knows what's going to happen with the punter. But yeah, I do think that, just situationally, it's just a bad matchup. Specifically, like, I just don't see them scoring points. They scored 22 points in the first 2 games.
Yeah.
Combined, not average. Like,
yeah.
I mean, they're not scoring 20 points against Notre Dame's defense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in the preseason, I said 34-14. And I guess I'll just stick with that. I feel like it's going to be like you said. I think it's going to be like 41-6, or it's going to be like 24-10 or something, like close. Just because once I think if you told me Notre Dame went up like 14-0 again, then they're in big trouble, right? Like big trouble. Like, get Angeli warmed up kind of thing. But if it's like 7-7 at any point, we're talking the grumbling is going to take place.
Here's the other thing that this is like a big factor in it, is that their line, which returns 4 starters, so kind of similar to NIU in that way too, right? Where you're like, man, they brought a bunch of people back, and you're like, a lot of these guys have started for multiple years and that, but like they've stunk in the first 2 games. Like their line has stunk, and their tackles have looked bad in pass pro, and they're not going to be able to block Notre Dame's front and pick up the blitz and all this kind of stuff. And like, it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough. And the thing is too, is that, you just don't see things like, hey, they leak out a back and it's man coverage and that guy's open. That guy is always picked up.
Yeah.
Notre Dame. He's always picked up. And then as soon as that happens, and then because Gabbard sees blitz, any Hudson Card sees blitz, whatever, and they think, gotta get it to my what? That guy's it's like, where's the next thing? So yeah. In other words, they better hit a lot of hots with the slants and stuff. Yeah. If they're gonna do it. And that's just not a way to
Notre Dame, they don't get caught up in that stuff. They're just too organized back there. They just don't have those kind of busts that you see from other teams. So, I mean, look, it could be a total blowout. I'll say 34-14, just for the, I guess, split the difference there. All right, we're going to end it there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. If you like what you heard, please hit this like button on this video. Please subscribe to our channel. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is we are going live. I'll be back tomorrow with the Happy Hour Friday show with Tyler Wojak and Luke Smith of the Locked On Irish pod. So I'll be back there. Jamie and I will be back on Saturday after the game, and then I'll do my morning after recap on Sunday. So that's why you want to hit subscribe, get all that good content. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Keep hitting and hustling.